Tonight, we're going to talk about the economics of choosing when to market lambs, and I'm kind of dividing it into two parts. So first, we're going to talk about prices and markets, and then we're going to talk about choosing when to market lambs. And so if we have time, we'll take a little break in between because it's pretty graph and chart heavy. So you might want.
Having trouble seeing the screen, let us know, and shut more lights down.
And the other thing is I also sent a PDF to the office here. If you guys want a PDF with full screen slides so that you can see all of them in sort of the big form afterwards, if it's useful for you. No, we don't. Okay. So first I'm just trying to set the stage so we have a little understanding of how price is affected. Okay, sorry. And so what we have here is that in Ontario, we have about 30% of the Canadian flock here. We do almost 53% of the slaughter in Canada, here in Ontario as well, okay? And so these are things that might affect our price. All right, and when we talk about self-sufficiency, we import more than we produce. So on the right, you can see in 2022, production was estimated at 16,000 tons, and we imported almost 28,000. Okay, and so our self-sufficiency in 2022 was 34%. So we're only supplying 34% of what we eat. And we don't eat much, okay? And the other thing is that when we eat more, we import more. But we'll talk about that some more. The other thing is that it doesn't really look like it's going to change anytime soon, right? So this is population projections scenarios for Ontario. This was in this document here that was published in May 2020. And so in 2020, we had about 14.6 million people here in Ontario. December 2023, we had 15.8. When you look at their projections, where we are in December is more on the high line at this point in time. Now, what we saw this period of time here, this historical line, we were getting about 200,000 people a year more each year. That's what we were growing. That's what we were growing by. Last year we had about 500,000 more. Hence all the problems we all know about. But a lot of people eat lamb. So if we're going to stay at 1 kilogram a person, we've got to produce more lamb or find more lamb somewhere, just to supply what we've been eating, which isn't much. So for us in the industry, that bodes well for price, supposedly, right? So the other thing is we've got a bunch of different weight ranges that we sell lambs in. So there's a bit of this black line is new, or this black bar, part of the bar is a new crop, and that's a description. It's not really a weight category. It's a light lamb, but it's something they've decided to categorize as a new crop. And usually it's based on price paid that they decide, wow, it must have been a new crop because it was a high price. This under 79 is actually 3 weight categories that they're sold in. And then there's 80 to 94 is the green, 95 to 109 is the purple, 110 is this dark blue, and this orange line is the sheep. We're not really going to talk about sheep today. So you can see that over time, we've been selling more, and this is just through the live auction. So we've been selling more head through the live auction. And in the last while, the increase has mainly come from the heavier categories. Right? So 80 to 94 and up. Yep.
Those colored lines are divided within the 100% of the lambs sold that period. So that portion would be, it would be 125,000 for the heavyweight.
Right. So this is the total number of heads sold. And these are add how we, the weights that added up to that.
Okay.
So, so the other thing is there's a price cycle, right? So lambs are seasonal, sheep are seasonal breeders. So they breed better in the fall than they do other times of the year, and have more lambs when they breed in that season than they do in other times of the year. So that makes the volume seasonal. And then we've also got holidays and consumers looking for lamb on holidays. That also makes it seasonal in a way. And this is off the OSF website. And it's just, I cut and pasted a few of the ethnic feasts that we see affect the price graphs that we're going to look at a little bit. And so there's Ramadan and Eid. It's falling off the screen a little bit here. Ramadan and Eid. And the reason why I mentioned those two together is that the date of those events changes. And so you can see over time, like 2024, Ramadan is March 10th to April 9th. But in 2025, it'll be March 1st to March 29th. And so it moves throughout the calendar eventually, keeps going around. And the same with Eid, right? You can see that this year, June 16th to 19th, but 2025 will be June 6th to 8th. And so it's moving. And then we've got Western Easter, and we've got Hanukkah and Christmas, and they're relatively static, right? They're the same time each year. And so we're thinking about those things just so that when we start looking at price graphs, we can look at the effects. So this is a lot. There's a lot of stuff on here. Now, I have a lot of years on here on purpose. And the reason why is when you're thinking about price and when you're thinking about how you might change your marketing scheme or whatever, you need to look at a period of time in order to feel good about your decision. And so there's a bunch of years here. The bottom two, so we've got 2013 is the very bottom line. The next line is this one here. So this is the pink dotted line, 2014. So we had price disruption then. Okay, so price had fallen, there's stuff going on in the marketplace, everybody's freaking out because they think they're going to go out of business and all of those good things. And so what I want you to notice there is that the lines are fairly flat. We're not seeing much of a cycle. Okay. This middle bunch of years is all kind of together. And when we look, we're looking at the price for 110-pound plus lambs. And it's not a lot going on. It's fairly flat, right? It's all just bunched up in the middle, fairly flat. When we get into 2020, that's this big round circle, sort of reddish line. Again, it's kind of flat, right? We don't have the same little bounce to it. And that's when we had COVID. We also had price disruption. Again, it was high price, but still kind of flat, not following the normal cycle. And then since COVID, we've had a couple of funky things going on where we've got higher than usual and then low, because we don't usually see that much up and down in this 110-pound plus. Okay. And so the next one, so this is 95 to 109. So what we see now is it's broadening out. Everything isn't as bunched together. The other thing I want to point out is that the scale, so this is dollars per hundredweight on the side. The scale on these graphs are all exactly the same, right? Ranging from 100 to 440. The reason why I point that out is if somebody just makes a graph in Excel, it changes this to whatever it wants so that the graph looks pretty. Okay, so a lot of the time you'll look at a graph of one thing, try and compare it to something else, and lo and behold, totally different scales, not easy to see what's going on. Okay, so these are all the same scale. So we get 95 to 109 pounds. We start to see these separate more. We can see this sort of price disruption on the low side at the bottom quite easily. We're seeing this bunch of years in the middle. And so these years in the middle were what we looked at as a normal price cycle. That was kind of normal. So we start off, sort of mid-range here. At the beginning of the year, we go up for Easter, and then we drop, and then we come up a little bit more again in the later fall around Christmas some of the time. Okay, now it's a little bit hard to see on here, but you can see it, you can actually see it the easiest in these two low price years, 2013 and 2014. You see in October, it pops up. The October price pops up. Eid was in October. Okay, so even though there was price disruption, we see that pop. And so through this mess of other years, you can see a little pop up in one of the months as you back up through the years. Okay. But similar pattern that again, when we look at 2020, flat again for these guys. And then since 2020, we've seen this big rise, much bigger rise than usual in the first part of the year, and then it dropping down into sort of regular prices at the end of the year. So in, what was it? 2021, everybody was really happy until summer. And then everybody freaked out because prices are falling. We're all going out of business. Well, we shouldn't have been quite going out of business because we were just reaching where we used to be. Except that prices had went up a little bit, right? And it fell down. 2023 is this purple with the big squares. People were freaking out last year. Prices are horrible. Not horrible. Horrible is down here at 2013 and 2014. And that's the reason why I leave this. Whenever I talk about price, I leave these years on here, because if you're planning your business, you need to know what truly horrible looks like when you're doing your risk planning, just in case, right? That this could happen. Hopefully not as bad, but just as a caution. Okay, so we'll keep going. So 80 to 94. So again, as we get into the lighter weights, the price per 100 weight goes up, and these move apart a little bit. It's easier to see this regular seasonal curve. Prices are better in the first half of the year, not as good in the last half of the year. Again, same pattern where price disruption, we see flat curves, and this 2021, 2022 is exceptionally high. 2024 has started very high, okay? Now, I don't have the most recent week or two in here, so I think it dropped. The price dropped, but just some stuff to think about. Okay, so now we get under 79 pounds. Same thing, looks a little different. What's different is that there's no effective Eid here. So we get higher prices in the first half of the year, and the last half of the year where we've had influence in these last number of years of Eid, popping the price back up now and then, doesn't happen for little lambs. They don't want them. So that's why it's very flat. And you see more of an increase towards Easter for these little lambs than you see on the other graphs as well. And then this was just 1 week in March, I think. We had a bad price. So that's the other thing, is these graphs are all monthly averages, not the same as what you get the week you went, right? but it gives us an idea of trends. This is where, okay, so this is an old graph. It's 2018 and 2019. And I didn't update it because this is sort of that regular curve that we expect, right? And so this is by week. So there's 52 weeks on here that are graphed. And so you can see, we see this same pattern where it's higher in the first half of the year and lower in the second half of the year. But we see the ups and downs more because it's every week. And we haven't smoothed that out by doing an average for the month. And so, you know, this person is going to be happier than this person in the same month, right? I got this high price instead of this little drop here. And that 2019, that peak price, that's related to one of those holidays. I think it's Eid. That's into June, maybe, or maybe not. It's May. Sorry, that's May.
End of Easter or Ramadan.
It's almost right over.
Yeah, yeah, but anyway, it does relate. You suddenly get these, you start to see it better on a weekly basis. So if you, and I think I've got a picture. This is by, oh, sorry, it's coming. Eventually I have a picture. So, oh yes, you can see it here. Okay, so now what I've done is for 2019, these green bars are the number of head being sold. So we've got number of head being sold, and then this purple is the price. So you can see in the early half of the year, we've got less volume, right? And we've got higher prices. And then in the second half of the year, we've got more volume and we've got lower prices. And it's this peak here that I was thinking about, this volume peak, that was Eid. Yep. Yep. It's 100 weight, but CWT is 100 weight, but I don't remember what centi weight. Yeah.
Yeah, centi is 100.
Centi weight. So these are the average. So these particular ones, where I'm using, and I'll talk about that again for later, but these are from Ag Canada, and I'll show you the reports that they're from. And so it's Ag Canada's summary that I've taken these numbers from, except for this graph. This graph is OSF, so the numbers on the Ontario Sheep Farmers website, I believe. Thinking, sorry, no, I don't think so. No, it's an Ag Canada report, but I'll show you one later. So you'll see where, so you can see, because I'll show you where to find these things in case you want to do some of this yourself. Or look up something yourself. So this is the yearly price, and forgive me, I don't remember why I'm talking about this now. But anyway, the under 79 is bars, and the lines are the 80 to 94, 95 to 109, and the 110 plus. And so it's from 2010 to 2023. And so over time, our prices have been going up, so have our expenses. But it gives you an idea of what it looks like. And it's not linear, right? It's a linear trend, but it is, there's an up and down to the whole business. Which doesn't, just see what my next slide is, right? So what that doesn't do is it doesn't help you that much when you're trying to figure out when you want to market lambs, right? But we're still sort of getting a picture. So this, what I've done here, is So one of the things that you want to be able to do is you want to be able to hear a price, price is such and such, and you want to be able to say, yeah, that's good. Or, it's not great. On something other than compared to what you got last time, right? That's your objective. And so some of that, we need sort of an idea of where prices are at and what they've been. And so this table here is the average price from 2019 to 2023 for the lambs. So we just looked at average annual price for these by year. And now I've taken 5 of those years and I've averaged them together, a weighted average based on the number of lambs sold at each weight. And this is the average over 5 years. So this is the average volume per year. And then we've got an average dollars per hundredweight, an average low price dollars per hundredweight, and average high price dollars per hundredweight. Okay. And so if you were thinking, okay, what's been going on, you have to talk to your banker, you can say these are the average prices in the last 5 years. Right? This is what's been going on. On the right, I've got the same numbers, only the average for just the year 2019 and the average for just the year 2023. Okay. So the first year and the last year of this 5 years. And I put them there because they're fairly different. Again, so as soon as we start averaging things, everything gets muted, right? And so in 2019, our prices were actually lower than what we've seen since COVID. And so we can see how much lower, and we had less volume of lambs compared to what we've seen in 2023. And so the other thing that we're going to have to think about at some point, and we'll talk about it more later, is this low and high price, right? Because when we're looking at prices and when we think about prices, we're talking about average prices. So another way to look at these same graphs we've been looking at, this is 80 to 94 pounds, sold at auction, same thing. And same years, right? There's my 20, these gray bars or these gray lines at the bottom are the 2013, 2014 years. This is way easier to look at than what we were looking at before, right? The shaded area are the years in between that were normal. The dotted purple is 2020. So again, there's that price disruption. And then we see 2021 is the purple line, 2022 is the green line. And 2023, it's hard to see on this screen, is this blue line that follows very much what we'd seen before with this group of years as normal, only it pops up at the end of the year. Right through the fall, the price pops up compared to what we were seeing before. And then we've got in orange just January and February of this year. So what's a high price, right? And a high price for me should be relative to what my costs are. If I know my costs, then I can start to say, wow, that's a high price, but not a high price, right? And what's a low price? A low price is something I can't live with, right? Or maybe it's something that returns nothing to labor. And you got to figure that out to yourself, for yourself, because it needs to be based on your business. And so price disruption, we've talked about a lot already. And it's interesting how we see this common pattern. And the reason why I pointed out is that there will be price disruption again. I don't know when, but when it happens, there's a chance that prices might be fairly flat, which helps you make decisions when you're thinking about your risks and all of those things at the time. So another thing that comes up when we talk about price is the effect of imports on price, right? We're bringing these imports in, they're wrecking our market, they're taking our business, and that's why we have low prices. Some people say our market's insulated, right? They don't affect us. We're selling the live lambs and the fresh meat. Some people say imports are destroying the prices. Some people might say prices would be higher if imports weren't allowed. Well, we don't really know any of those things. But we can look at imports and see a few things. So this graph here is similar to what I talked about before, in that the blue part of the bar is the amount of lamb that we produce here in Canada. The gray part of the bar is the amount of lamb we're importing into Canada to give us a total supply in kilograms. This line is the population in millions of people. Okay, the bar is in millions of kilograms. Every time the bar gets higher than the line, we're eating more than a kilogram. And if we look at the production, every time we get to eat more than a kilogram, it's because they sent us more imported product, not because we produced.
Is that imported live or frozen?
This is
Live animal?
no live animals are here. We import very few live animals.
So that
This
Australia.
is, yeah, yeah, and I'll show you in a sec. You'll see. So, couple of slides.
Okay, I was just wondering if they were on the hook or not.
Yeah, they're all carcass. So what I've added to this now is the line, instead of being population, is the average price of 80 to 94 lamb, 80 to 94 pound lambs, just to pick one. And so what happens is that we think about price being a result of supply and demand, right? So that if there's too much supply, the price goes down. If there's not enough supply, the price goes up. When we look at what our price has been compared to the supply, it doesn't always match up, right? So if we look here at the beginning in 1994, we've got a starting point of, we've got this much product and this price. It looks good, right? The supply starts to go down, the price starts to go up. And then the supply starts to go up, the price starts to go down. And that works a little bit, right? It's working. And then we get to like 2005, 4 or 5, and the price is going up and the amount is going up. And then we drop a little, and then it's sort of staying the same and the price is going up. And then we see the price drop and the supply drop. So we've less, and it bounces around. So it doesn't necessarily follow it. So this is the same thing in just Ontario. So this is Ontario imports with that price. The blue part of the bar is New Zealand. I don't know what color that is on this screen. Gray part of the bar is Australia. And the green part of the bar is Ireland. The line is total amount imported. So the difference between the top of the bar and the line came from other places. So almost exclusively, we're getting our product from New Zealand, Australia, and Ireland. Okay. And then again, the price is the dotted line on there, and it doesn't always follow. Sometimes it seems to, you can kind of make a case for it, and then it doesn't. So What about the value? Are they dumping a whole bunch of product in here and it's really cheap or not? Or how does that work? So what I've got here is I've got the value of the product that was imported. And so the red line is Canadian dollars per kilogram of imported frozen lamb. The green is the average of all the imported product. And this top line is the average of the imported fresh product. Okay, so what this tells us, this average green line is closer to the frozen because we get more frozen. So this, but you can see that the price on the imported fresh product 2023 was like $13 a kilogram. On average, that's everything. So it gives you an idea. Then, what did I do here? This line at the bottom is our 80 to 94 pound dollars per kilogram live. Okay, so I changed it from dollars per hundredweight to dollars per kilogram, but it's the live auction price, okay? On what we're getting over the years on average, right? It's this average thing again. And you can see it's about 6 in 2023. And so if we say 50% for dress, to switch it to a carcass, the line would look like this orange line. Right? Because we're talking about a live animal. If we turn it into a carcass, so it compares to this. So it's not crazy price differences per kilogram, right? So we can't say, wow, they're pumping in a whole bunch of cheap product. Not necessarily. Compared to what we get live. So just again, a whole bunch of assumptions, a little bit of funky math. Still hard to say they're dumping stuff. So now now where are we? So now where we are is that we've got all this product that comes in at a certain price. One of the things that happens that that people need to be aware of is that when there's a price dump, like so the 2013, 2014, those lines where we had that price disruption, those low prices, that whole thing started in summer of 2012. And that's where we started to see it in our markets, it going down. Where they saw it in the rest of the world was January 2012. There was a 6-month gap. So some of that, I think, or my guess, is just because if I'm a supermarket or whatever, and I buy some lamb from Australia or New Zealand, I have a contract that's maybe 6 months long, maybe a year long. The price, I don't negotiate price every week. There's no way I negotiate price every month. And if you go in and look at prices of frozen New Zealand in the counter, they're not bouncing around, right? And it's because they've negotiated for a period of time. And in those countries, they lamb once a year, right? So they're going to have sort of a yearly price cycle and price setting mechanism to some degree that gives some stability over the year compared to what we do. Even though the price is going up and down, when they sell product to other countries, they're not renegotiating weekly, probably not monthly. So our price is affected by them. They're probably not dumping us with product. price forecasts. So there's FAO. Now, what does FAO stand for? Anybody remember? Huh, it's gone. It's a,
American agriculture.
no, it's a world organization. So this is a world organization. Sorry, this is what happens when I can't see my notes. Sorry, I'll be laughing. Those things I forget. Anyway, it's a world organization. You can see, you can go to it and look at it yourself. It will tell you what the acronym stands for on the website for sure. And they do like agricultural outlooks for the world, for different products. So you can go to meat and you can see stuff for meat and you can see stuff for lamb meat. So this figure here is from their agricultural outlook 2023 to 2032. They're always doing a long sort of outlook of what they expect because they're trying to forecast. And so what they have on this graph here, we see pork, poultry, beef, and sheep. Okay. And so there's two lines, and the orange one is the real price in the past and what they expect the price to do over the next few years. The gray is what they call nominal price, and that's some sort of, I don't know what it's standardized to, their nominal price, but it'll be standardized to a particular year to take into account inflation. Okay, and so what they're saying is that their expectation over the next few years is that we're going to see the price of pork drop. We're going to see the price of poultry drop, but we're going to see that the nominal price is actually increasing. So they expect their costs to go down. For beef and sheep, they show the real price as being flat. They don't expect it to do much different, but the nominal price is going to be going up. So sorry, I'm saying that opposite. The nominal price is what I would call the real price. The orange is the inflation adjusted price. Okay, so real price continues to go up, probably aren't making more money. And so these guys are probably losing a bit more, these guys are probably losing a bit more. They're not always right. And it's a world prediction, right? So individual markets will vary. On average over the world is what they expect to see. So it just gives us an idea that they don't see any big change coming. And then this graph on the right is from Australia. So Meat and Livestock Australia has a website, and they have a whole trade section. They have trade reports, they do predictions, they tell us stuff about our market that we probably didn't know. Because we are someone that they trade with, and they want to know what they need to know to try and market their product. So this graph on the right is Australian cents per kilogram per hundredweight. And what's interesting for us really is their prediction. Okay, so in 2023, they saw their price drop, and they're predicting that it's probably going to stay similar, but maybe rise a bit, is the most probable in their predictions. Could be a little bit high or could drop a little bit. They don't anticipate anything big as far as change. So that again just gives us some sort of idea on what everybody else is saying about price going forward, right? Australia expects their supply to go up for 2024 in the next couple of years, which means that they should be able to send us as much product as they have been, but They may or may not, depending on their other destinations and what happens there, because they're gonna send it to the ones that'll give them the most money. Okay. So if we look at what does that look like? On the bottom, so this bottom, this is lamb and mutton sheep exports out of Australia. So 2023, 2024, and 2025, I've got a box around shipped weight, carcass weight of what they expect to ship. And so you can see it's relatively stable. So even though they think, you know, even though it was going up a bit between 2022 and 2023, it was relatively stable for the next couple of years. And in 2022, we actually got more product from them than we did in 2023. So they chose to send it somewhere else. They probably got more money. Some of it. So just to sort of orientate everybody. So what's a good price? Back to that, a good price is something that's going to allow you to meet your financial goals. It could be different for everyone. It's going to depend on your expenses per lamb, per ewe, the contribution you need to labor and capital expenses, all of those good things. Market reports. So Ontario Sheep Farmers has market reports. They've got monthly summaries, weekly summaries. So this on the right is an example of the weekly summary. So the top is all the markets summarized together for the week. The middle, they're talking about changes in volume and price. I don't usually look at it myself because I want to understand the bigger picture. And I get, you know, start to lose my mind. Up 32%, down 25. What does that really mean? And so I need a bigger picture than that for my brain. And then on the bottom, it breaks out a few of the major markets. So the other thing that when I look at the summary from sheep farmers, one of the things that I keep in mind is when their week is, right? So their week, February 28th to March 5th, if you look up there, is Wednesday to Tuesday. Okay? And so you just need to realize that because Wednesday to Tuesday, am I saying that right? Yes, Wednesday to Tuesday. Because Brussels is on Thursday, which means that, like if we look at this, February 28th to March 5th, February 29th is the Thursday before this week. Sometimes there's a big price difference between weeks. And the Thursday before getting summarized with this is weird. So you just kind of have to be aware that that's a thing. And so like for my brain, if March the 7th, the Thursday was in with the 5th and the 4th, it would make more sense to me that those numbers are going to be closer to each other. So it's just something to be aware of, that it does work that way. Now, I think I'm getting to these, yeah. So the Ag Canada reports, so I've got at the bottom where you find these, okay? And so this is a weighted average price report out of Ag Canada. Their week is Saturday to Saturday. So they put those in the same week. So if you look at an average from Ag Canada's website and an average from OSF, it might not match. Okay. So just something to be aware of, again, if you play with some of these numbers. And I mean, for how you'll use them, they're not exact enough for it to matter a lot, but it's just, it might come up. Just so you don't think, wow, somebody did something wrong. It's not wrong, it's different. So again, for me, I tend to use some of these Ag Canada reports because it's easier to get the data, right? I can pull out all of these at once. And so this average price report gives me averages by month, and I can see the previous 4 years by month for each weight category, same page, already done. And so I can start to look at that and get an idea of what's going on, or make a little graph or whatever. Yep. Sorry, so when would,
Like,
so Sheep Farmers reports them?
I think she's wondering what.
So this, we're getting there. It's a long time to get there. So that's part 2. Coming soon, yeah. And then, so then the other thing is they have a sales and weighted average prices at Ag Canada as well. And that's where you can see numbers sold and the price range, because the last one was simply average price. And if you want to see how many animals and see the price range, you can get it by lamb category for a year at a time in one spot already. And so they also have a weekly report, which would look like this. And again, it ends Saturday, March 9th. And so this is where it might not match. When you pull up for Ontario, you also get Quebec. And if, just in case you're interested, there's no heavy lambs that show up here. And that's because all heavy lambs in Quebec must go through their marketing desk. And it's a whole separate deal. There's no auction sale of heavy lambs in Quebec. Yeah.
Where do they go through?
They go through a central selling desk. They're all sold by carcass weight. Yeah. Yes, yeah, and they started that, oh, it's been quite a few years now, they've been doing that. So sheep farmers also have these weekly market graphs. Okay, so just similar to the one I did, it's by week, and you can see the average price across a year, and below it, the volume of lambs. Okay, my only gripe, no standardized, it's gone, axis, right? The graph always looks this good. Because we've changed the dollars and we've changed the number of head. And so we've got to really look at that. Like this one's 2,500 and the top of that one's 3,000. And so it can be, if you're not thinking about it, it can be quite deceiving. So you have to keep that in mind. So conclusions of this part is there's a lot of choices. Price is more volatile at the farm than at the consumer level. We didn't talk about that much, but that's sort of what happens with that imported product. It's not volatile. We see price disruption, and we see a lot of small changes up and down in our marketplace. Larger price disruptions are driven by global supply. So we see the COVID problem, it's a global problem, right? When we saw the 2013, 2014 price, that was a global price drop. To reduce our risk, we need to figure out how to understand what a good average price is and what a poor price is. We didn't talk about it, but cost control, cost of production, break even, all of those things are going to matter. So now if we can have a little break, and then we'll come back and do more of this. Sure.
So we, back to why would that be? That again?
So So they decided as a province, like their organization that's equivalent to Ontario Sheep Farmers, basically decided to use its marketing powers and create a central selling desk for their heavy lambs. And so what that means is if I'm a producer there and I want to sell a heavy lamb, it goes through their system. I don't have a choice. If I want to send it to an auction mart, I have to send it outside the province. And so we do see Quebec lambs show up right through the yards sometimes. Otherwise, it goes through the central selling desk and the prices are negotiated with packers on more like a contract basis, right? So it's a more steady price. There's not as much fluctuation. And they also have a price grid, right? So all of those lambs are graded. And then you get more or less money depending on how they grade out. So many market choices is all of these different weight categories. And we're still just talking about auction. And I mean, that's really all we're going to talk about today. I mean, at the very end, right, I'll mention that, there's a couple of other choices, but there's not really time to get into that because it's different philosophies. But there's just so many weights that you could market at. And it's not like, something like pigs. There aren't like 6 categories or 8 categories of a market hog. And so it gives us a lot of options, which is great, but it also makes it harder in a way to decide what to do. Okay, so we'll take a break for maybe 10 minutes. Is that okay? 10 minutes is okay?
So
Okay.
feel free to have water, coffee, tea, cookies across the hall.
Ask the question.
Well, just, if there weren't so many imports, would that affect our bottom line for our shape and we would have to
Can you
produce more?
repeat the question now for
So,
people?
so the question was, if there weren't so many imports, would it affect what we get for our lambs? And it's probably not. Because, and the reason why I say that, like, it might affect it somewhat, but probably not as much as you think, because, I mean, if you look at the price of lamb per kilogram compared to the price of other meat, we're also competing against that, right? On what people can actually afford to pay. So there's that. And then if people can't get, if you always have lamb at Eid and and you can't get one, then you have to get something else and maybe you'll stop looking, right? So if you can't supply enough of the market starts to shrink. So I don't know. It's a funny thing. Yeah, it's a catch-22. Yep.
I had another question asked. Outside of that, the break even point, is there any suggestions for like break even point or future lamp market? Sheep market?
So you need to do your cost of production. As horrible as it is. You gotta figure it out. And we'll talk about that a little bit here too, is that at the end of the day, you just have to figure it out, right? And so I've got some suggestions on how you can figure out what it's costing you to feed the lamb to a heavier weight, right? And some examples, but no answers. Because it's different on every farm, but yep. Yeah, and we have one, like, we have one on our OMAFRA website, like a cost of production calculator. That can help you, that gives some suggestions if you don't know, like if you're trying to plan something and you haven't done it yet. And you don't have numbers at all, it gives you some average numbers that are at least reasonable numbers. Might not be right for what you end up having to do, but at least in the ballpark. And if you leave me your email, I can email that link to you if you want. Yeah. Yep.
Do you have a breakdown?
No, because sex isn't reported when they sell them. So it's not reported or recorded anywhere. So we have no idea.
For some Muslim market, events, they
Okay.
want male ram lambs, because they ask you to separate them if you can at the market.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Like they prefer the ram lambs for that market. But what is it? Someone told me one time that if you're a poor Muslim, you get a female.
Once the hide is up and they're cut, you don't know what it is.
Well, and we have no reports on it, right? It doesn't get reported.
This is wondering
So the age is not recorded. And like when they go through an auction ring, those buyers will be deciding if they think they're old, like they're older or not older. And I've got a slide here coming on growing fast or growing slow. Okay. And they'll make an assessment of what they think, and they make that assessment because of dressing percent. We'll talk about it. Okay, so we better get going. So now in part 2, we're going to talk about choosing when to market lambs. And one of the things is that it's highly affected by what we're doing in our business on our farm. Are we doing an accelerated system or an annual system? If I've got an accelerated system, I'm automatically going to be selling lambs a lot more often in a lot more different markets. If I'm running an annual system, then maybe I have to do some thinking and some choosing about when I'm actually lambing and when I want to be marketing, because I'm not marketing as often. Facilities is a huge issue. What do I have space for? How long do I actually, if my used lamb and I'm on an accelerated system, do I have room for ewes that are lambing plus lambs that are still there and lambs that are getting older and growing them heavier and they're going to be here longer? Do I even have space? Do I have the facilities to make that work? And then what are my feed resources, right? And what do those cost me? And that's going to affect whether I choose to grow animals fast or slow or something in between. And it can be different year to year. And what are those feed resources costing me? And then your breed of animal, that the lamb breed, not all breeds of lamb can grow to the same weight. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. So the first problem is you need to know your numbers. And, you know, how long does it take for animals to gain weight on your farm? What's your average daily gain? What are your days to market? What's your cost of feed per pound of gain? You need to track what your feed is used, the cost of the feed, and do some conversion, right? What's the feed conversion? You need to figure out those numbers. And if you figure out those numbers, it makes some of this work a lot easier. It's work, even if you don't do it all the time, if you do it every now and then, so you know what's going on, it can make a big difference. Because that's the only way you're going to know for sure if it's worth it or not worth it to change the weight, or whether the price is good enough for you or not. Otherwise, you're guessing until the end of the year and you find out if you have money or not. So just an idea. So I've got a couple of slides here in here just to justify why I'm using the assumptions I'm using. So this is just some average daily gain numbers for Dorset, Ritos, Suffolks, and some crossbreds. This is from the Record of Performance Program, or the Genovis. And so generally, the people who have lambs on this program are growing their lambs indoors, right? So they're usually on full grain diet indoors. These are for the most part. These are the average daily gains that they're getting. So it's around 0.3 for the Dorsets and Ritos. The Suffolks are around 0.37. The crossbreds are around 0.3 as well. Now there's going to be a lot of variation within a group of lambs, but on average, those are the numbers that are sort of good average numbers to use. And then I put it in pounds because we market at the auction market in pounds, right? So in pounds, it's about 0.66 of a pound a day. For Suffolks, 0.8 of a pound a day, and crossbreds 0.64. Okay. So then we get days to market, or age at market. So this table just gives you an idea of how it can change with the gain. So what I've got here at the top is I'm assuming that they are 70 days of age when I'm weaning them. And again, these numbers I'm using are just sort of average numbers. I'm not pushing them hard or anything like that. So I'm saying 70 days when they're being weaned. So I can gain 0.46 of a pound, 0.55 of a pound, 0.66 of a pound, or 0.75 of a pound. And then, and I'm saying they're all starting at 50, basically 50 pounds at weaning. So at 80 days, 10 days later, that first group is gonna be 55 pounds, the next group is gonna be almost 56, the next group is gonna be 57, and the last group is almost gonna be 58 pounds, right? So if I want a 95-pound lamb, roughly, that I'm gonna send to market, at those different growth rates, it's gonna take they're gonna be 170 days old when it gets to that in this first group. They're gonna be 150 days old if I can get them to grow at 0.55. They're gonna be 140 days if I can get them to grow at 0.66. And they're gonna be 130 days if I can get them to grow at 0.75 pounds a day. Okay? And that just gives you an idea. And so if you do your own numbers, you'll know these things, right? You'll be able to figure this out. If you know what your average daily gain is, if you're running those lambs through every 2 weeks and you know that right now I'm gaining 0.55 pounds and they're 67 pounds, and I know if I want to get up to 95, it's going to take me 50 more days, right? You can do the math and see what's going on. And you can look at the range of the group and see what the range is, because they're not all going to gain the same. I keep talking about averages of averages, and then we've got, they're not all born on the same day. They're born over a bunch of days, and then they're not all going to grow the same. But at least if we have the averages, you can figure out a plan, and then, because it gets a lot more complicated when you start putting the range in. But so this is how you get an idea of what are my days to market on average, right? And that's why I've got to know I've got to take some weights, I've got to know what they're gaining. If I know nothing, so currently say you know nothing, but say I shipped lambs last year to the auction market. What you can do is this, okay? This gives you a rough idea. So, and it doesn't work with Accelerate. Because the groups all get confused, right? But if you're lambing annually, then say I've got 10 groups. And say 10 groups, and when I say 10 groups, I'm talking about 10 groups I sent to market. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my auction slips, and I've got, say, 10 of them, and I'm going to take the first one and the last one. Okay, and so I started lambing April 10th, and I finished lambing May 10th, and the sale date of this first group was October 1st. They marketed 10. I'm going to guess that their birth weight was about 4 kilos, or 4 pounds, sorry, not very big. My average sale weight was 105 pounds. So I'm going to say I gained 101 pounds. And so the difference between the day I started lambing and the sale date is 174 days. So I'm guessing that one of those lambs that was born first went to market first. And if he did, I know that my average daily gain was 0.58 pounds. And then I'm going to say, here's my last group. And I started and ended lambing the same time because I had this one group of lambs. My last sale date, I'm saying, was November 15th. It was 10, and there's my birth weight. I'm going to guess the same birth weight. My average sale weight was the same, gained the same. My days to market now, I'm assuming that one of these lambs was born on the last day, and he got marketed last. And he would be 204 days to get there if I subtract these dates. And I get 0.49 pounds a day. And then I'm going to do my worst case scenario. My worst case scenario is that a lamb born on the first day got marketed on the last day. And how old is he? He would have been 234 days to get to market and would have gained 0.43. So even though I don't know what happened, because the group is together, I know the first group of lambs I marketed in the last, I can just assume that, okay, my days to market range from 174 to 234. I know it has to be in there somewhere. And at least I have some clue, right? It's not great, but it's some clue if I know nothing. It's a starting point. And it gives you some idea of maybe if I'm gonna assume an average daily gain, maybe I better assume it to be somewhere between 0.4 and 0.5 pounds a day, if I'm making a guess. And then if I keep a little closer tabs on it in the future, I can maybe nail it down closer, but maybe this is enough to make some decisions. And it's sure better than not figuring it out. So what you really want to do in an ideal world, you know, when you're not busy, which doesn't happen, is I want to weigh these lambs, right? And I want to know, I want to have a weaning weight, and then I want to weigh them every so many weeks as I'm going to market. I'm going to have these different weights. If I recorded the dates of those things, number ahead, number shipped, an average weight for the group. If you're lucky enough to have one of those wands, it'll usually take the weights and average it for you. If I can measure my pounds of feed eaten for that same group, then I can figure out the days, number of days between weights. I can do an average weight gain. And what that's going to tell me between those weights is I'm going to end up with a weight and an average gain between weights, so I can see how that's changing as they get heavier. And I can match it up with the ration that I'm feeding and how it's working. And whether I'm switching them, right? Because you usually switch them to something else as they get heavier, and how that's working out. And so then I'm going to have a pounds of gain for the feed I've eaten. And I can do a feed conversion. I can know what my feed conversion is. I can know all of these things. And that will tell me how much it's costing me to put on pounds of gain. If I fill this out, I can figure out how much it costs to put a pound of gain on the average for that group. So that's ideal. Because then if I'm making a decision, do I market now or not? I know what it's costing and what kind of a risk I'm taking compared to what I think the market's doing. The other thing that I can do is that if I have these numbers and I know what it should be, if it's suddenly not, it gives me, it goes, bells go off. Did I change my ration? What's going on? Are they sick? What's happening? Also, if I'm doing frequent weights, you're going to pick up those lambs that stop gaining, right? There's going to be lambs that for whatever reason, they got some weird thing, maybe a little bit of pneumonia, you can't see it, but they're not gaining. And maybe you market them now, right? Maybe they're better off because maybe their feed conversion is going to be like 10 to 1. And you want them out of there and they're just costing you too much. So definitely dollar value to this, but it takes a little bit of work to get it set up. So weaning weights, weigh every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depends on the age, depends on what you can handle. To monitor your average daily gain, maybe regroup and ID those that aren't growing. Should, you know, if you're trying to get them to, if you're trying to generally market at, 102 pounds, and you got a lamb that's 75 pounds and doesn't gain for a weighing or two, maybe he's out the door. Maybe it's not worth it waiting. But if it's going to take him 4 months to get to so tracking feed, right? That's, you need to which feed they're eating, what it's costing you, who's getting it, how many head, pounds you're feeding a day, start and end, this kind of a thing. So that you can answer the questions on the other page that are pounds per day per lamb and pounds gain, compare it to pounds gain and get this feed cost per pound gain. So you have to have this stuff too. It might take a couple of sheets. And I mean, I didn't spend very long making up these little forms because I didn't know if they're interesting for people. And that's one of the questions I have for you guys is if something like this might be useful, I'll spend more time and make something up to track these things properly if it's useful. So you can let me know at the end if you like. Because like I said, I just threw some things on a spreadsheet and it could be a lot prettier and work a lot better. And I mean, if you're really interested, I get summer students every year and we could do something like, you know, put some formulas in and make it calculate so that all you have to do is fill it out. So, but it's whether it would be useful or not. So now we're back to our numbers. So, okay, all right. So, okay. Oh, that's good. We'll definitely do it then. So now that I'm into trying to decide when to market lambs, the price per hundredweight is not all that useful to me. What I really want to know is how many dollars I'm going to get for the lamb, for that head, for that animal. Because, you know, price per hundredweight for a 43-pound weight compared to an 87, you know, hello, my brain doesn't do that automatic math very well. So I need to know dollars per head. So what I've done here is we're back to these, you know, per year. So this is 2023 average price per year by the different weight categories. And what I've got here is I've got the weight category, the average weight, the weight difference is the weight that you would have to gain between categories. So to go from 43 to 59, I have to gain 16 pounds. To go from 59 to 73, I have to gain 14 pounds, etc. Right? So it's the weight difference to get to the average of the next category. Then I've got the dollars per head. So what I did is I took that average dollars per hundredweight. I multiplied it by the average weight to get a dollars per head. How much did I actually get when I sold that animal? And so under 50 pounds, you can see I got 127.51. For this 59 pounder, I got 185.66. For the 73 pounder, I got 215.51, etc. The last column is the difference. And so it's the difference between, so I get $58.15 more if I sold a 59 pounder than a 43 pounder on average across the whole year in 2023. I got $29.85 more if I sold per head, if I sold a 73 pounder compared to a 59 pounder. I got another $26 if I sold an 87 pounder compared to a 73 pounder. I got an extra $30 if I sold 102 compared to an 87. And then I got another $14.80 if I sold a 121 pounder instead of a 102 pounder. And that's averaged across the whole year. So first look, I shouldn't sell anything under 50 pounds. I shouldn't sell in that under 50 pound category. I'm leaving $58 on the table and I only have to gain 16 pounds to get to the average of the next category. That's not a lot. So even though the dollars per hundredweight look good, when I get to dollars per head, it's not a lot to work with when I gotta pay for the expenses of the ewe for the year. And I can get quite a bit more for putting 16 pounds on. The other end of the scale, I've got to put 19 pounds on to get $15 more on average. Doesn't look so great. Especially because I get over 110 pounds and my feed conversion is going to be worse at that weight than it is at lighter weight. So it's going to cost me more to put on that weight, on that heavier lamb than it does when it's lighter. And my potential is only an average of 1480 in 2023. Now, I've done summaries of summaries of summaries, right? And we don't actually work this way unless we can market every week in every market. So we've got to break this out a little more. So we got to compare. So what I've got here is now we're breaking this into months of the year. And so I started with the year so that the big charts aren't as boggling. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to break it out by month because it'll mean more to us. And so on the graph, what I have here is I've got these middle three categories. So I dropped that under 50 pounds. And I dropped the I dropped the bottom two light categories and I dropped the heavy category. Anyway, so that we're just looking at three to start, so it's not so messy, okay? And I think if we go back for 1 second, these three categories in the middle, 65 to 79, 80 to 94, and 95 to 109. The reason why we're looking at those together is the dollar difference is quite similar, right? So on average, the dollar difference to gain this 14 or 15 pounds between categories was similar. So if we break this out by month, what does it look like? So the blue line are the 65 to 79, the orange is the 80 to 94, and the gray is the 95 to 109. So as expected, no, not necessarily as expected. So, sorry. So it's dollars per head, right? So now instead of, this is the opposite of what you would have seen if we looked at price per hundredweight. Because price per hundredweight, these light ones will have a higher price. But we're looking at dollars per head. So here's our dollars per head across the months. What's interesting to us is when the lines are far apart. Because when the lines are far apart, there's a bigger price difference. So at the beginning of the year, the lines are close together, which means we're getting similar prices per head for all of those different weights. That's good to know. If we're thinking about should we take them heavier, we're looking for bigger differences, which we're seeing sort of April, May, June, and we still see some fair differences through the fall. And so I've put the actual numbers in the chart on the right. And so what I've done is I've highlighted in green the boxes where you get the most per head for each category. So we've got months down the side, we've got the weight categories across the top. And this last column that says 73 to 102 diff, that is the dollar difference between the first category, those 73-pound lambs, and the last category, those 102-pound lambs. So those are the, if I decided to grow a 102-pound animal instead of a 73-pound animal, I could get that much more for putting on those 29 pounds. So the complicated part is, this is why we had a break. Okay, the complicated part is that if I've got a 73-pound lamb in January for $210 and I say, well, you know, I'm gonna grow it to 102, it's not gonna be ready in January. I can't just go across the chart and say, oh, I could have got 241 and the difference is $30. Doesn't work like that. Because that's not, I mean, it could work like that if I haven't bred the ewe yet. And I wanted to change when I breed the ewe so that I had my 102-pound in January. But I don't necessarily want to do that, right? That's a whole other thing. So now I have to know how many days it takes to put gain on my animals to be able to read the chart, right? So if my gain is about 0.6, then I can roughly put, if my gain is about 6, and I think I said my feed conversion was 5-to-1 or something, I don't know. Anyway, I can do a category in about 30 days. So my growth isn't that fast. Say I can do a category in 30 days. That works for my monthly averages. So let's say that how it really works is, say in March, I have a 73-pound lamb and we're looking back at 2023, I got $245.88 for that lamb. Should I have waited till April and at 87 pounds and got $275.42, or waited till May and got $321.34 for putting on that weight? And what would it have cost? Those are the things I need to decide and think about. And so in times where, you know, when I'm looking at this graph again, you can kind of say, okay, in March, my dollars per head are here. And, you know, here's my light lamb. Maybe I could aim for something up here in that May or June. Is what that's telling me, right? Maybe that's an option for me. Maybe not. Like I have to figure out my costs. I have to figure out my space. I have to figure out lots of things. But something to think about. Especially if I'm having trouble making everything work, right? If I'm looking at, I need to produce more to make the money work, can I put a few more pounds on a lamb at the right time and make it happen instead of having more sheep? Something to think about. So that's what that does. Now, we're going to talk about these over 110 pounders. So the interesting thing is, if I put them on the graph, you can see that in the first half of the year, that yellow line is quite close to the gray line, which means that I'm not getting a lot more per head for putting that extra weight on that heavier category. Even though I'm getting more per head, it's not a lot more. And so when we look at the chart, what I'm showing on the difference thing, in the last column, the dollar difference is the difference between that over 110 and whether I was 102 in that 95 to 109 category. So not a lot of dollars to work with, especially April, May, June, July. Well, May, June, July are the worst, less than $10 per head more. No reason to do it. The fall, maybe, right? The fall we're into the 20s at least, $26, 23, 28. There might be a case for it, depends on your cost of production, depends on your situation. Might be something to consider. Taking them a little bit heavier. But most of the time, not so much. And when we looked at, this bottom chart here is just that year chart that we looked at in the beginning, right? So when we saw that average of $14.80 and we said, probably not gonna be enough. When you look at the whole year, it breaks out to probably not gonna be enough most of the year, but there might be a time period that you could consider it, depending.
Not sure the daily costs.
No, because everybody's is different. But we'll talk, this is why you gotta track the. You've gotta track it, and once we do this, we'll do a little example where I make an assumption, right? But this is the problem, you have to have your own numbers, that's why we don't have the answer. And everybody, and you know, you're making your own feed, you're buying feed, who you got it from, all of those things, the analysis came up at, what you had to supplement, like all of those things come into it, which is why you have to do your own numbers and why your numbers won't be the same as someone else's. And so the choice you might make in this might be totally different than the choice someone else makes. So then the little lambs, so we'll come back to these guys. And these under 50-pound ones, look how low the dollars per head are throughout the year. And even, you know, even when we look at it by month, so those 43-pounders, right? So February, March, April, maybe December are where you're gonna get the most dollars. Still really hard to pencil selling those guys and not putting a little extra weight on them, even in a particular month. You know, unless you have an issue, right? Like if you could, in this case, if you could sell them in March for $162 and you had no space anyway, or you had something going on, like it's, but still, you know, yeah, rents, exactly. And this could be part of the problem, right? That a lot of the ones going through it that way are rents, which make the price as well. So then the 50 to 64, I put on the graph again now as well. And so again, I did the same kind of thing where I shaded green the months where you're getting the most per head. And you can see it's always the beginning of the year. And it's always sort of, you know, March, April, May, June are where there's the best opportunities. And so again, you know, is it worth trying to move some of the lambs that you might sell then into another weight category a month or two later? Something to think about.
Space
Space is a huge issue.
reduces as they grow.
Yeah. And a lot of, you know, lots of times people are set up to sell small lambs because they don't have space. And even though there's these opportunities, if you don't have the space, you don't have the space. And putting up a barn is pretty costly, or sometimes creating space is costly, but maybe there's another way. Can you shift your lambing a little bit in that case? Depends. So now I've got a little example here, and we'll work through some assumptions. And so I'm trying to decide whether, and I'm doing this in hindsight, which is perfect, right? I'm looking at 2023 and it's already passed. So I'm going to get the right answer. So should I, you know, sell my light lambs, 60-pound-ish lambs at Easter, or should I market them later in 2023? And so what I've assumed here is I've assumed that they're gaining 0.6 pounds a day on the feed that I have available. Easter was April 9th. And so I said, okay, you know, I could have sold them here at 58 pounds, the week of March 22nd. And so there, my average dollars per head is 231.50. Or I could sell them at 72 pounds the week of April 12th. And I would have got 263.32. Or I could have sold them the week of May 3rd at 85 pounds. And God, I don't think I can read it. And got 255.45, which seems to be less. Or I could have sold them the week of May 24th, 101 pounds at 332.28. Or I could have sold them at 117 pounds the week of June 21st and got 304.54. And so these are these weekly summaries off of OSF's website, right? So that's how I can look at that. And so if I put that just in a little chart, this is what I've got the lamb weights, the price per hundredweight, and then I've got my dollars per head that I've actually gotten. And then I've got the difference, the dollar change, right? And so this May 24th, wow, if I could have done that in retrospect, right? I get an extra $100 for getting up to there. But you can see what it looks like. The weight I had to gain. So in this case, what I've done with the weight, it's not between categories, it's compared to that little lamb, right? So this, I had to gain 14 pounds to get to 72. This next one, I had to gain 27 pounds to get from 58 to 85. I had to gain 43 to get to 58 to 101, etc. And so then what I've done is I said that my feed costs me $300 a ton that I'm feeding. And I've just pulled that random number out of the air. Okay, and it's covering all of my feed costs. And I said my feed conversion is 5 to 1. So I'm going to have to feed 5 pounds of that to get a pound a gain. And it's going to cost me $300 a ton. And so when I work the math, that's my cost, my feed cost then to go from 58 to 72 pounds is $10.50. To go from 58 to then go to 85, I'd be up to 20.25. To go to 101, I'd be up to 32.25. And to go to 117, I'd be 44.25. And then I've said, I'm in the barn, I'm going to use some straw. And I said it's going to cost me 5 cents a day. And then I put mortality in. So that's the other question. That's the other thing we have not talked about is if you keep lambs longer, somebody might die. And what does that do to it? Right? And so that's a real concern. If you have ventilation issues, if you have pneumonia issues, this is a huge concern if depending on the time of year and whatnot, and you're thinking about going to heavier weights, because it's going to affect your average daily gain and you're maybe going to get some death loss. And that's why you need to know what your numbers are for yourself and what's happening and see how it's changing. And so I've just assumed that, you know, over time, there's going to be 1% mortality. And so I put a cost on that. And then I said, this is my actual margin that I have to contribute to the labor, took any capital, or is it still worth me doing it, right? No, there isn't. So you
How
have,
do you figure your 5 to 1? Is that your
I just pulled a random 5 to 1.
year?
Pulled it out of the air. And I mean, it's, and I'll show you a couple of graphs here of some feed conversions for merino lambs, right? It looks a little different. But, and this is the point, like when I did this is not real, right? You have to use your own numbers because it might be way off. And it's going to be different farm to farm.
and you were using past numbers. You don't know when you go. to
Oh,
market.
yeah, this is the best way, right? Yeah, because on top of this, you're trying to predict the future price. And that's why we looked at all this price stuff first, what the patterns look like. So it gives you an idea, what are the chances of it being this way or not this way, right? Does this all the time? What does the pattern look like this year? Do I keep going or not? What do I think it's gonna be, right? And so, I mean, if it's sitting in there in the normal pattern and there's no, world shut down because of COVID or something catastrophic, then, sometimes you get to March, and you can see, oh, it looks pretty good. I maybe am good for a couple of months, right? Because we're following a regular pattern versus an irregular pattern. Whereas if I'm way up here doing something funky, I might go, oh, you know what, I maybe should take this price and run. Because it's maybe gonna drop, and that's why you wanna know what those patterns are. But yeah, so this, I mean, I need to show you the process, but those numbers mean nothing. Right? You have to
Should
do
we
it.
take an average of the last X number of years and go with the average and hope for the best?
And that's what this has all been, right? Because I had that 5-year average
Okay.
and an
that's-
average across months. That's why I was doing all that averaging.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you average this the same way, you might float on the top of things. Who knows?
We're predicting the future.
Another 2008.
It's better than not, right? It's better than picking a number out of the air. Yep, yep. Um. Yeah, I think, yeah,
March to April. Ramadan last year.
yeah, I'm not sure. It could be. We'd have to go back and look in the other. We have to go back and we'll look at the end. And see, it could easily be that it's affecting it. In which case you would know it's coming. And it wouldn't be as big of a risk. So then there's this bit about feed conversion and fat and lean, and can every lamb be a heavy lamb? Absolutely not, right? So feed, weight, and age affect fat cover. So as a lamb gets heavier, it deposits more fat and less lean. So when it's quite young, it's depositing mostly lean. And so lean percentage up here, fat percentage down here. So depositing more, and as it gets heavier, there's less lean and more fat deposited. These graphs are from merino lambs. So these live weights and percentages aren't necessarily going to work for the breed that you have. So frame size also affects it, but it just gives you the idea that this changes, right? And so two things happen. One, the lamb can get too fat. Two, feed conversion ratio gets worse for a couple of reasons. Takes more energy to lay down fat than lean. And you start building rumens over here for feed conversion, right? So as they get heavier in live weight. And so on this again is merinos on the right. And so they're showing, and again, they're on a grass system. So it's a bit different than it would be for us. But so at 30 kilograms live weight, they're getting about a 5-to-1 feed conversion ratio. Once they get to 40, they're up to 6. Once they get to 50, they're, closer to 7, etc. to 1 pounds of feed per pound of gain. And so depending on your ration, what you're feeding those lambs, you can have quite a different feed conversion ratio than the 5-to-1 I pulled out of the hat. Might not even be close, right? Because 5-to-1 is good. And, yeah. So the other thing, so this whole thing of fat cover and can every lamb be a heavy lamb? When the lamb goes through the auction, the buyers are sitting there looking at that group of lambs and deciding if the lamb is good and what they're gonna pay for it. So then we come back to, on these price reports, we have the range in price. So the low to high, the difference is big. And so one of the things that you want to know and that you should know all the time is when you sell lambs and your stub comes back and you know what you got, is that average or not? Is it above average? Is it average? Is it below average or not? And why? Sometimes you can't answer why. Sometimes there's no good reason, but hopefully you know why. Because if one of the things that they're looking for is an animal that's going to dress out well. And so if they think that the animal's old, which means it'll have a bigger rumen, which means it'll have a poorer dressing percent because there's more weight inside, then they're going to pay less per hundredweight than they would for an animal that they think is younger with less rumen because they think they're going to get more meat. And the thing is they're pretty good at it. They're pretty good at judging that because they take those home, they kill them, and they find out. And they go back and buy again next week. And they've got to make money. So they pay for every mistake when they've guessed it wrong. So the other thing you want to do is, if you're getting good prices for this weight of lamb, you don't want to switch to another weight of lamb and get a below average price either, right? That's a risk. So you got to know that what you're producing is right. So making sure that you have the right fat cover for the weight is important. You're really looking for a fat score of 2 or 3. This is just out of the Australian Fat Scoring Guide. So you want to feel over the ribs. It's 12 centimeters from the midline, 12th rib. Feel over the ribs. And 6 to 10 millimeters, feel those ribs easily, but there's a little bit of tissue. 11 to 15, you're starting to feel more. If you put your hands on there and the whole thing goes like this, they're way too fat. Okay? That whole thing moves, they're not gonna be so happy, right? It's gonna be 60 to 20. You're gonna be reaching to feel those ribs and nobody's gonna be happy and they're not gonna pay you well for those. Because when they walk, that all moves, they can see that. And so you're aiming for that 2 to 3, 2 is ideal. But 3 is okay, up to 12. Anyway, so this is a whole other thing that comes into it, right? Is that, can you get the right finish on them at the right time?
They don't like fat sheep
And like that,
or
They-
big sheep.
I can't do anything with the fat. Yeah,
Yeah, someone on here decided to live that half value.
not a lot. I mean, they do stuff with it, but it's much lower value. Yeah. So growing fast or growing slow. So this, again, is a very moderate example compared to some of the feeding systems we use here. And I put up this just so that I can, when I pull my numbers out of the air, they're pulled from somewhere and I can explain what they are. So this was a little project that they did in the States in the 90s. These were Suffolk lambs. They were going for a slaughter weight of around 50 kilograms. And so they compared lambs that were born in the fall, November, December, January, and raised just on concentrates. compared to lambs born January, February that had 60 days of creep and then went out to pasture, compared to ones that were born March, April, had 30 days of creep and then went to pasture. And so they have the pre-weaning average daily gain. They have the post-weaning, post-weaning gain, then they have the lifetime gain, they have slaughter weights, and they calculated days to slaughter, right? So we have our days to market, days to slaughter at that weight. So,
No cost of-
because you can't. Is it doesn't mean it, even if they put theirs on there, it doesn't mean. You gotta do it. And so what I did, another lovely chart here. And so what I did is I said, okay, we're gonna call fast growth is 156 days to market. We're gonna call slow growth, taking 234 days to get to market. We're gonna say that we're trying to market lambs at 102 pounds in this 95 to 109 price range. And we're gonna look at the difference in dollars per head of growing faster, growing slow, just on market price because of how it changes when you market. So we're back, this is 2023. And so, and I assumed that my lamb was born the middle of every month. Okay, so I said, if I've got a lamb born August 15th and it grew fast, it would be ready to go to market the week of January 18th. And that week, I could have got $218.81 for that lamb. If I grew it slow and it took me 234 days, I would have sent it to market on April 6th. And I would have got $295.96 for that lamb. And I would have got $77 more by growing it slow. And so I did that for each month. Okay. And so what this tells me is that if they're born in August, September, or October, I did better by growing them slow. If they were born in November, December, or January, I would have done better by growing them fast. If they were born in February, March, April, May, June, or July, I would have done better by growing them slow. But it's debatable for April and June, because there's not much difference. Again, this is just an exercise, but it gives you an idea of how it can change what you're getting in dollars per head because of the seasonal pattern we have. Takes a lot of thought. Has to fit into your system. Just some ideas to think about.
You have to know.
Someone said we grass-fed population.
Sorry?
We grass-fed population.
So there is no cost in here. And the slow growth were based, like I took the fast growth and the slow growth from the slide before, which the fast growth would be based on concentrate fed, and the slow growth would be based on pasture fed for those growth rates. But I mean, it could be done with different feedstuffs, but
Two that are more complicated. Yes, but that is like 80 days for on. $7.
yes.
I did say yes, but your feed costs is less than grass pay. And then somebody asked, do you have any idea what average cost
No. I know, isn't it awful?
No.
I know, we have no numbers. We have no numbers, and I mean, some of the other industries, we do cost of, well, some of the other industries, we do benchmarking, cost of production, data collection, every year or every couple of years, and have those, somewhat average numbers for the industry. Sheep, we have nothing, and some of it is because no one wants to give their numbers. Every time we've done it, we've like pulling teeth and maybe get 27 people. And it's just not enough, right? Especially with the number of production systems we have and everything like that. You need like quite a bit of participation to get some good average numbers, because you really need, you need 40 or 50 farms that are annual, 40 or 50 farms that are accelerated, just because there'll be a whole bunch of other things that they're doing different to get some numbers that are close. They did try for a little while. Yeah, nobody responded. I think a few people did, but not enough to average numbers. Yeah. Yeah, it's a real struggle, because it is. It's if you, yeah, it makes it really hard to get started. So the other thing is growing fast or slow, then is going to affect your dressing percentages, right? So this was from New Zealand, so this is their conditions, and they called fast growth 7 months, okay, and slow growth 14. Grass. They have 0 concentrates, right? So they're just feeding on grass, and so feeding to roughly the same carcass weight, you can see that fasted live weight on slow growth, 43.2 kilograms versus 40 for roughly the same carcass weight. So they have to take them, six pounds, roughly 6 pounds heavier to get roughly the same weight. Well, I mean 7 pounds to get the same weight, because the dressing percent is lower and they're leaner. So when you grow a lamb slower, it tends to be leaner as well.
Would that have been the same breed
Yes,
compared?
yes. So the exact numbers wouldn't be the same for us, but the idea is the same. So then, if I haven't confused it enough, I brought into this, low and high price versus average price equation. And so so I'm back to the 5-year average and 2023. My little chart is the same, except I've added all of these columns at the end, same differences. And so all I've done with those columns at the end is I did the difference in price first. So if we go across, we've got average volume, average price, low price, high price, low difference. That's the dollar difference between the average price per hundredweight and the low price per hundredweight. So the low price is $60 less than the average. And the high price is $50 more than the average. And then I calculated that per head. As hundredweight gets confusing, I really like per head, so it's actually $40 less. The low price is $40 less per head, and the high price is $34 more per head. So when we talk about differences in changing a weight category, we see roughly the same magnitude in being able to move from an average price to a high price, or from a low price to an average price. So practically on farm, the first thing you need to do is make sure you're getting the best price you can in the category you're in before you start changing weight. Perhaps, as a thought. And I did the same thing for 2023, and the numbers are are similar, just out of curiosity.
comment, and I think it was back to us on that.
Okay,
But then, so then is the fact that farmers here can eat fruits and it be offered here in Ontario. And then there was a comment added to that. Also, that our freight and shipments with us.
yes. Yeah, like. So cost of production, I don't have any numbers with me. It's been a few years since I found, there are, every now and then, there are, I can't remember who does it. Somebody tries to do sort of average cost of production across countries. And like Australia, New Zealand isn't necessarily that much lower than us, depending, right? Like, I mean, on the feed side, when they can eat only grass, they are, but they've got to send that meat halfway around the world. That kind of eats up a bit of their advantage.
Especially when the ships get held up, like I heard this year because of tsunamis or something, they've got thousands of animals on a boat, they can't ship. Once they're off of Australia, they're not letting them back on to Australia. So boats are open with animals being required.
Exactly. And we don't get the live animals here. We just get carcass, but they send a lot of live animals to the Middle East. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I mean, they have costs, like we have costs that they don't and vice versa. And so there's not as much of a difference as you would first think because of that shipping cost. And then, sorry, I forget the last half. Yes. And I mean, it's I mean, just getting stuff to market here in Ontario is a struggle, and it's going to get worse, right? Because we have the carbon tax going up the 1st of April. That's going to hit us all in like many forms, right? It's on so many things. And they're not done yet. I forget what it's like. We're only halfway through that or something.
Yeah.
It's going to be like double what it is in the next few years. Like there's a huge impact. And so like what's holding us back? That's always a question for us. Right? Is why isn't our industry bigger? So, you know, it's an easy industry to get in. So it's also easy to get out, is one thing. It takes a lot more creativity than some of the other species because we don't have any answers, right? Like, you know, we don't have those things, right? So it takes a lot more work and creativity to make it work. There's opportunities there, but it's a lot of work and more work, I think, than some people realize when they get into it. Yeah, but yeah, there's hard to know. It's hard to know the right answer for that one for sure. Now, I really don't know where I was going with back to this slide again, so we'll just flip along. We don't want to, I've got to get on it. So it's 20 after 9. I had no idea. So there's just a few more slides. So if you know your numbers that we talked about, the ones you really need to keep track of, it really reduces risk when you start to make some of these decisions. Because you need to know at what point is it more economical to get rid of my lamb. When he crosses the scale, you know, after weaning and you start running them through every few weeks, every time they cross the scale, I'm making a decision. Do I still keep this or not? Right? Or should he go? And so if I have all of those answers on my costs and what it takes to get to the same weight and whether he's putting on weight or not, it makes it easy to make that decision. And I've got to consider all of these things: cost of feed, average daily gain, what my feed conversion is, potential market price. I have to know what happened last year. I have to know where I am in the marketplace when I do market. I have to know what happens on the mortality side for me. So consider collecting some of this over the next year, and at least one person said they're interested, I'll get my student on it, and we'll maybe make a spreadsheet that actually does some calculations that might save you some work if you, because it's enough work getting the data. It's really nice if you then don't have to do a bunch of formulas. And where are we? Oh, so I do have one thing. And this is, is everybody good to hang on a few more minutes? I want to, so we did, a few years ago, I did this with one of my summer students. I had a computer science student. And so he made this market summary for me, and I will show it. It's in an Excel spreadsheet. And how it works, if I can just flip to it. Is it showing it? It is. Awesome. Okay, so how it works is in this page here, you take the slip that you get from the auction barn and you type in the date. So the auction date, the date they went to market. Was it lambs? Was it sheep? So put, yeah.
Great, can you share that screen?
Oh, sorry, it's not sharing? Oh,
Stop screen sharing the one and then start sharing the other.
I didn't stop, so I thought it went. But maybe it would have not.
Not.
Do think. Oh yeah, look at that. It just automatically stopped the share and didn't tell me. That's not the one. That's screen. Okay, can you see it? Oh, perfect. Okay, so yeah, you put in the date, lambs, and this is right off your slip, right? I sold 3 lambs. The total weight was 205. The price per hundredweight was 330. That's all I have to key in. Every time I sell lambs, key in those. Okay. It calculates the average weight per animal in dollars per head, right? Because when I send them, like, you see on the 23rd, I had a group of 4 sheep and a group of 7 sheep. And you know how it groups them, there might be a list. And so then it averages the weight of the group, right? And the dollars per head for the group. And so it calculates that there, but that's, you don't want to look at it there. What happens is then there's another tab here that's called My Market Summary. And are you getting that? Okay. And it gives you a table. And so how this table works is it does some of the stuff like I've been doing off the price reports for you, for your lambs from those auction slips. And so it groups them. It tells you the number of head that you sold in each. So first of all, up here, I can choose by year or by month or all time. And so I've got some random data in there. And so I'll say I want to look at it by year, and I can select here. I can see my years. I've got data in for 2018, 19, 20, and 21. So let's say I'll choose 2020. And so this is how many lambs I sold that year, how many sheep. It's broken out by the categories, the average weight per animal, sorry, average weight total. That's for the group, sorry. Average weight, no, it's average total weight in the category, average weight per animal, the average price per hundredweight, the average dollars per head, and total income that you got. And so you can look at it. There's 2020, and go to 2021, and it gives me all of those totals. And I can see what I actually got per head for the different weight categories. Now, there's a couple of graphs. The graphs aren't great, but we graphed a couple of things. And you can change the year up here on that as well. Change that to 2020. And so then you can see by month the lambs sold in each category. So the top graph is in dollars and the one down further is in weight. Now, in the top one, this line is the number of heads sold. And then the bars are dollars by weight category. And the bottom one is weight by weight category. And dollars is the line. Which they aren't the best choices for graphs at this point, but it gives you an idea. And so if anyone wants to do this and wants this spreadsheet, let me know as well. I'm happy to send it, or I can send it to Emily and she can send it out if it might be useful. Because it's an easy thing to just put those few categories in, and if nothing else, it will give you these average numbers. So you can say, yeah, you know, in 2021, I got $269 for my 95 to 109 pound lambs, right? Well, they were 100 pounds. The average weight I sent was 100 pounds. So my 100 pound lambs, I got 269. And so that you have those numbers right off so that, and so if I can, now if I can switch back, I've just got like 2 slides. What happened? Is it, I'm on the slide set? Fantastic. So factors influencing success. Are you maximizing this category potential? Right? Prices based on average. Are you high? Are you low? What are the condition of your lambs? You have to consider breed, frame size, wing fats deposited. You need detailed feed cost knowledge on your farm. Planned marketing, ability to identify individuals not gaining because of poor feed conversion. And then if you're considering other choices, right? Direct to packer in some form, direct to consumer. Deciding what you need to get out of different programs and different choices becomes a lot easier because you know exactly what you've been getting for what weights and what it's costing you to get there. So that when you see what you might be able to get in some other choice, it's easier to figure out how good that is for you. Direct to consumer. So I have a whole talk I do on pricing for direct to consumer that has, you know, you take prices from their website and how the cuts break down and how that price works, because there's a whole spreadsheet out of the UK where they do that, and you can weigh some cuts, put it in, and it breaks it all out for you. Yeah. So if you wanted such a thing, I could do it next year. So it's a whole talk. And then I had some questions for you guys in that, again, are any of these tables or graphs useful? And if they are, let me know and I'll try and produce them regularly, right? Like do some of these average numbers. If it's useful, it's something I could do once a year or whatever for the last year and the last 5 years and keep up to date and throw it in an article or something. And if anybody's interested in having some sort of session to actually work out your own numbers in some of these things, that's something we could do another time too, is actually sit down and do real workshop where you bring data, work out numbers. Just not sure if anybody really wants to do that in a group or not. And then this market summary, if people find that useful, because right now that what I showed you is in an Excel spreadsheet. And if people are quite interested in it, I could try and see if we can get it into Google Sheets, which is free if you don't have Excel already. So just let me know. or let Emily know, and she'll let me know about any of these, if any of these things are interesting for you. And I'll, get those done. So sorry I went over time. I, wasn't paying attention to my watch. Thank you.
Any more questions? More online?